Hey everyone, and welcome to your Java tutorial on dynamic arrays or array lists. So to begin with array lists, I'd like to just start with our previous example of arrays. If you didn't watch that video, go back and take a look at the arrays video. I'm not going to recap everything that we covered there. But I will say that this is how we declare an array in Java. And what I'd like to do is I would like to now declare an array list. So we are going to declare an array list of type string. We will call it grocery list. And we will set it equal to new array list. Awesome. So I just wanted to put these two declarations and assignments side by side. You can see with our groceries assignment here that we had to give it a new string array of size 5. You might notice that in our array list, we didn't have to give it a size at all. And that's because our array list data structure is dynamic, meaning it can expand and contract. You can add and you can remove from this list. And it just compensates and it manages all of the memory for that. So this is kind of just a side-by-side representation of the two things being declared. Okay, so this is how we declare an array list. Now let's move on to our assignment here. So the assignment, let's say value assignment. So we see that in our normal array, this is how we access our elements and our memory locations, and we assign them values this way. In an array list, you have another way. You assign them through a method. So if we wanted to assign carrots, for example, that is how we would do it in an array list. And what an array list would do is it would basically assign the value of carrots to the last available or the soonest available memory location. So, for example, we don't have anything in our array list now, so this is going to add it to the 0 index, the same as groceries is doing here. So if we go grocery list dot add, and we now add celery, it's the same thing. Since we have one element, we're going to assign celery to the next available one, which is our first index there. And so let's go through and just assign our values here. And do this quickly. And there we have it. So now we've populated our array list with our values. We can also print them out. So we will go to this next piece and we will say read values. And so here we have our normal array being read. So how would you read a value from an array list? We can do the same thing, system.out.println, and we can say groceries, but in this situation, grocery list dot, we can say get, and we just pass in our index there. So, whereas with the normal way, you would access through the straight brackets. With an array list, you use the parentheses here, and you're using a getter. So what I'll do is I will just access each of these here. Awesome. And I'll actually also do a system.out.println. We'll print yeah, we'll say array list items and print that there. And up here, I'll say array items, and we got to grab the carrots there because we got to make it flashy. All right. Boy, doesn't that pop. So now let's go down to the number of elements. And actually also something I didn't cover in the first video is how to remove elements, which we will do in this video as well. So in the number of elements, we have the same function, except we can say size. So I'm going to say in array, and I'm going to copy this and then say in array list. Awesome. So here we have our side by side of how to write to an array and an array list, how to read from, how to show their size as well. So let's run this program. And we see that everything is looking the same. So we have our carrots, celery, milk, all that stuff. We have the same thing here for our array list, number of elements in the array, number of elements in the array list. Okay, awesome. So everything is the same. Now you might be wondering, hey, why are we even learning this if it just does the same stuff as an array? Well, there's extra built-in error handling in these methods, and there's extra security around them. Also, what you get with an array list is you get a bunch of other methods as well, and we can cover some of those extra methods now. So let's start talking about removing items from an array list. Now, something I want to point out is that when I, just scrolling up to the top here, when I started using the array list, my IDE imported the array list class just automatically. But I want to point this out because if you're running into compiler errors or something like that saying that it can't find the class, you need to do this at the top. So just to come back to the bottom here, if we want to remove an element from an array, there's a few different ways to do it. My preferred way is to access the element. So in this case, this element has the carrots value in it, and I would just assign an empty value there. And if I ever needed to access, I would have to do a check to see if it's an empty value. There are other ways to do it. You can pass a null here if you'd like, but me personally, I don't like to have nulls floating around, so I just pass in an empty string and be done with it. For an array list, what you can do, since it's dynamic, you can, grocery list here, you can just do remove and pass in the index. So what that does is it goes into it's a similar line as our array removal here. So let's go through and print out, we can print out our array list value here, and we can print out our grocery list value here. And let's see the similarities and our differences here. So as you can see, this is very interesting. So we printed out, we removed our values and we printed out our 0 element in the groceries array. And that was an empty string because we just tried to remove it here. In our grocery list, we removed our first element here, and we printed it out here. We printed out celery. Why do you think we printed out celery versus printing out nothing? That's because, as we talked about in the beginning of this video, arrays can add and remove, expand and contract dynamically. So what this did, when we create this 0 element in our array, we don't really have the ability to easily reduce our array by 1 from the beginning. There are ways to do it by copy and erase over and stuff like that. But with an array list, we can easily remove elements, and that removes it totally. So it decreases the size of our array list. So if I copy this, paste it, and then I print out our size, we can now see our size. Let's run this again. And you can see number of elements in the array list is 5. Once we print out the number of elements again, down here, it's decreased by 1 because we've removed our very first element. So that's how you remove an element in an array list. Now there's another cool method in our ArrayList class called contains. And so if we do a system.out.println, we're going to do grocery list.contains, and we are going to look for celery. So I'm going to also print out just a little divider here, and we'll say grocery list contains celery. And let's run it and see how this does. And you see here that it printed out the value of true. So this is kind of cool. This function is kind of cool because what the contains method does is you pass in a value, and the contains method searches through your entire array list and produces a Boolean. It returns a Boolean telling you, hey, does this element exist in your array? To do that with a normal array instead of an array list, you need to loop through manually and do a lot of comparisons. The final cool method that's in an array is the isEmpty method. So we're going to say, is the array list empty? Question mark. And we're going to print out grocery list dot is empty. And so, I will run our program here. And so you can see, is the array list empty? And we get a false. Now, is empty basically produces a Boolean based on if there are or are not any elements in our array. So if we have even one element in our array, we're going to produce a false Boolean. If there are no elements in our array list, then we're going to produce a true Boolean for is empty. So this has been your Java tutorial on array lists or dynamic arrays. Thanks.